What's up, guys? Welcome to Believe in Rams, part of the Believe Network. Aaron Coscarelli, Tyler Dragon of USA Today, back with you. Be sure to do all the things. Subscribe, comment, rate, follow this podcast. You can catch us on Believe TV. Follow us on all the socials. Get in on the action. Lots to talk about. But first, let's pay our sponsors, Tyler, okay? BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you are a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selection of odds on everything, NBA, college basketball, NHL, UFC, BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. So from everything from three-pointers to hat tricks, BetOnline's got you covered with odds, stats, and more. For every game, every play, every win, BetOnline, the game starts here. All right. Out of the gate, we've got breaking news.
Yeah.
We've got a lot to talk about in this show. Even want to talk to you about what Les Snead has been saying about Stafford, about Cooper Kupp. But first, Rams wide receiver Tutu Atwell is going to, in fact, stay in Los Angeles. The team and the wideout have agreed on a 1-year, $10 million, fully guaranteed contract per Adam Schefter. Wow. So Ian Rappaport of NFL Network also added that Atwell's fully guaranteed money will be paid out via a $5 million signing bonus and a $5 million base salary. How do you feel about that? $10 million. Is he a $10 million contributor, Tyler?
Well, I'll say this. He's definitely flashed, not only in training camp. He was probably arguably the best training camp wide receiver I've seen during Rams camp in the offseason. And then there are certain times he flashed during regular season games. He's a vertical threat. He takes the top off of the defense. He can play in the slot as well. And he's a guy that can create space for a receiver like Puka Nacua, who's going to run a lot of the underneath routes, the short, intermediate type routes. And Tutu Atwell is a guy that stretches the field. It just shows you what the Rams think of him. And also, this is a receiving room, let's be honest, that needs to be filled out, especially with the Rams saying that they're going to trade or release Cooper Kupp. So Tutu Atwell, he's one of the many pieces I expect the Rams to have in order to fill out their wide receiver room. I do not think they are done filling out their wide receiver depth at all.
We'll talk about the wide receiver depth and even sort of piggyback this on the things that Les Snead said about Cooper Kupp recently. But $10 million, when you see that, do you feel like it's a lot of money? I mean, if you look at the, tweets and people's reaction, I think some are scratching their head wondering why pay him so much money when, you have a guy like Cooper Kupp that you could, try to negotiate or figure out how to keep him. Is Tutu worth $10 million at this point?
I think the Rams are paying him for their belief in the wide receiver. I've seen Tutu Atwell up close and personal during training camp, and even in times where not of the media or not fans get to see him. And I can tell you, he has definitely at some points during practice been the best Rams wide receiver. And I think they're paying him because of his potential and his upside. I do believe if he's given opportunities in Sean McVay's offense, he can be a receiver that can catch 40, 50 plus balls a season if he can stay healthy. He's a receiver that can be maybe your slot guy now that Cooper Kupp is no longer going to be in the team. They're not paying him that $10 million salary for his production that he has done, in years past. They're paying him because of his potential, his upside, and what he can do in this Rams offense. He is a vertical threat. He's a speed guy, and he can take the top off the defense. And that is valuable for all NFL teams, particularly the Rams, because the Rams don't really have a guy like that other than him. When you look at a Puka Nacua, who's not a speedster, he's more going to beat you with his physicality and his route running underneath and in the intermediate. So I can see the concerns some fans have, Rams fans saying, why don't you pay a Cooper Kupp? But when you look at Cooper Kupp, He's on the backside of his career. He's no longer ascending forward. He's no longer getting better. He's a little bit past his prime. That's not a knock on Cooper Kupp. It is what it is. He's a former Triple Crown winner, but he's not that receiver anymore. He does not separate anymore. He's not a guy that can beat you all the time with his route running ability. He can still get things done, but right now the Rams are getting younger at multiple positions. You look on defense, you look at offense, and this move represents that.
It's so true, right? It's so interesting because, these are decisions that are never easy. Fan favorite, a guy like Cooper Kupp wakes up in the morning and he sees this deal. How do you think he's feeling?
Well, the Rams have been upfront and honest with Kupp this all off season. I mean, he tweeted it out that the Rams were letting him go or trading him. Les Snead has said as much. Sean McVay too. So I would be a little disappointed because all athletes are competitors. I imagine he's a little bit disappointed. Like, man, you don't believe I can get it done, and you're paying this guy. But that's the nature of the business. Teams move on fast. If they believe that your best days are behind you, they're going to move on. And Cooper Kupp is not the first wide receiver this has happened to, and he will not be the last.
No.
The 49ers can move on from Jerry Rice. Why can't the Rams move on from Cooper Kupp? So it's just the nature of this business. It's the part where you kind of feel for the receiver because Cooper Kupp wants to be a Ram through and through and retire as a Ram, but that's just not in the cards, and it's not in the cards for most NFL players.
Yeah, Atwell, like you said, is young. Second round pick by the Rams in 2021. Didn't see a lot of playing time, of course, as a rookie. But I think as we lean into some of the other conversations around the team, I think you're making a lot of good points, right? It's sort of on point with what Sean McVay has been echoing during the offseason. They want to diversify. Like you said, they want to find somebody that can complement a big play, threat, physical guy like Puka. And Tutu Atwell is still showing what he can do on this team. Let's talk about, because there's other news and notes that have happened with the Rams. We're going to talk about Jonah. We're going to talk about Stafford. We're going to talk about what Les Snead said about Stafford's heir apparent in a second. Let's touch on the wide receiver room. Can you give us, because I think even despite the signing of Tutu and having other young guys on the team, how high does wide receiver become in terms of priority for the Rams on draft day?
So I love this conversation because even beyond the draft, free agency, the wide receivers in free agency, I mean, you talk about players like a Davante Adams. You talk about players like a DK Metcalf who just requested a trade. There are so many wide receivers all over the National Football League who are either free agents or are trade candidates. Chris Godwin from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So when I look at this Rams receiving corps, I would think they might want to extend a DeMarcus Robinson. Jordan Whittington has flashed as well. But this is certainly a group that needs a team, that needs to address the wide receiver position through the draft, at least to get younger. But then also look at free agency. There's rumors out there that Davante Adams wants to return to the West Coast. There are only a few West Coast teams, right? And the Raiders are not going to be one of them because he's already played with the Raiders. So that leaves maybe the 49ers, the Rams, the Chargers, maybe the Arizona Cardinals. So that's a really good situation. And I would call around to see if he's interested. But yeah, to answer your question, I do think one of the Rams draft picks will be a receiver based on the direction of this franchise is going. They're getting younger. They have Matthew Stafford. He's the veteran, but they want some young pieces around him that can grow and develop and continue this playoff trajectory that the Rams are on.
So good. I'm sorry. I take notes when Tyler Dragon speaks because you're absolutely right. That was one of the things excuse me, Sean McVay was saying when all of this was going on with Stafford a week or two ago was the hard part of his job is figuring out how to bring and infuse together sort of a different identity where you have a young roster and you have some veteran components to it.
Mm-hmm.
But yet you got to think about the future. And that's one of the things that, Les Snead and Sean McVay do so well as, oh my goodness.
Somebody needs some tea.
As they look for a repeat of the NFC West title and figuring out how to find guys to complement that offense and Matthew Stafford. I was going to talk about Jonah Jackson, but I think since we're on the wide receiver conversation, let's just put a button on the conversation about Cooper Kupp, okay? Because Les Snead and Sean McVay both spoke to media and had some different answers, right? It seemed like Sean McVay was sort of saying they weren't necessarily like the possibility of them reuniting could still be. However, Les Snead very much said that they're trying to find a trade partner. And that
he didn't mince his words.
He said, quote unquote, least likely option would be Cooper would stay in Los Angeles. Okay. So the likelihood of the Rams getting a team to take on Kupp's contract might be the tricky part. And I don't know if you're getting any word in your sources on the likelihood what he's due $12.5 million in base salary, $7.5 million a roster bonus, 5 of that is guaranteed. As you mentioned, guys like Debo, Metcalf, Lockett, Godwin. Is there going to be a party interested in a $20 million receiver who's almost 33 years old?
Absolutely not. I imagine before the new league year begins on March 12th that Cooper Kupp will be released. It's the same type of situation as Davante Adams. And let's be honest, at this point in their careers, Davante Adams is a better receiver than Cooper Kupp. You can make argument that Davante Adams has always been a better receiver. The Jets released Adams because they could not find a trade partner to absorb his salary. So I imagine the same situation is going to happen with Cooper Kupp. They're not going to find a trade partner, and ultimately they're going to have to release him. I mean, Cooper Kupp is still a productive player. He's not the Triple Crown Award winner, but he can still be a starting level number 2, maybe number 3 receiver in any NFL offense. And so I believe when it's all said and done, the Rams are going to have to release him because no team is going to want to absorb that salary for an aging wide receiver.
So interesting. Yeah, and the Seahawks, if we're going to stay in the division, the Seahawks parting ways with DK. They also, of course, released Tyler Lockett. It's an interesting thing to ponder. What that wide receiver room will ultimately look like. And again, Sean McVay said, and in your opinion, as you look to decode what McVay wants to do this offseason in terms of refining the offense, how do you see things panning out when it comes to, and we'll have obviously a bit more specific show regarding the draft, but how do you see them trying to find complements in terms of playmakers on the offense? Do they pick up a guy? You're saying it's going to happen in the draft with a wide receiver, but also do you think they're going to find a complement to Kyren Williams in the draft? Because again, I think a lot of people still sort of scratching their head. The Blake Corum experiment didn't really work out.
So a few things. So one, DK requested a trade. So the Seahawks didn't release him. So the Rams could be a team that interested in DK in trade. I don't think that's going to happen, but
that would be bananas.
Yes. As far as Blake Corum, I think his opportunities weren't there last year. I still think the Rams believe in him still. But when you have a running back like Kyren Williams, you want to continue to feature him in the offense and then spell him with Corum every now and then. The biggest need skill position wise for the Rams, in my opinion, are pass catchers, wide receiver, and even tight end. When you look at the receivers, the Rams are drafting late in the first round where there could be receivers available. I do think that maybe within the first few rounds, the Rams should look into drafting a wideout just because of the way their roster is constructed and what they need. Tutu Atwell is more of a slot receiver. I do think they need maybe another outside receiver, or maybe you double down on the slot receiver. Then you say, well, Tutu has never been a starter who's played 17 games and started 17. So maybe we add on another slot receiver just for, insurance. So I do believe, to answer your question, the Rams will address that skill position wide receiver spot. And I think that's more of a priority than running back, because Blake Corum, in my opinion, he just did not have the opportunities there, but he is still a good, capable running back, especially a number 2 back.
We'll get off this topic. One more quick question for you. I think it's an interesting one. How do you see this offense in terms of wide receiver play? How do you see it evolving and improving? And where in last season's schedule was it a problem? Obviously, the first half, guys, of the season, massive injuries, offensive line. You didn't even have your 2 guys in Cooper and Puka for 5 games. But when we look to move the ball forward, how do you see this offense? And what do you think Sean McVay wants to do that might be different next season?
So the easy answer is to say the games against the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah.
when you look at the Eagles, they have 2 legitimate number 1 wide receivers in A.J. Brown and Davante Smith. The Rams really didn't have that because Cooper Kupp was aging. Obviously, Puka Nacua is a legitimate number 1 target, but when you don't have another guy who you can continue to trust upon to separate, that is a problem. So I think in the playoffs, it kind of showed a little bit, especially against the Eagles. Against the Vikings, that game, they really,
Both
everything
games
was working with the Rams in that game. So when you get against those upper echelon teams that can kind of bracket a Nacua or double team him, you're going to need somebody else to beat you. In my mock draft, I did a mock draft this year, and I had the Rams actually drafting Matthew Golden, a receiver from Texas. And I had that because he's a receiver who just ran the fastest 40 at the NFL Combine. He's a receiver that can play X or an outside, and obviously he can stretch the field with that 4.2940. And so he fast receiver at the Combine, bona fide, legitimate speed. And that's the receiver the Rams could target late in the first round. He's probably going to be there. And that's a receiver room that's young, that has a variety of different skill sets at each position. And you can see, okay, I can see what Sean McVay is working with. So that's the direction. If I was the Rams GM, I would go. But I do think when it's all said and done, they will address wide receiver, and they're not done just because they signed Tutu Atwell.
I love it. I love it. Speaking of wide receivers, and Aaron needs more tea segment.
What kind of tea do you have? Green tea?
It's a good question. I drink green tea.
Okay.
When I try to hydrate and my voice is not so good. And then I put in, this is going to sound really embarrassing. I put in it's by Symbiotica. This is not a paid sponsor by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, they're really expensive. But I put this, I forget what it's called. It's some sort of it gives you vitality. I'll look it up. I'm not sure. But I put little tinctures in it to try to stay young and fresh and cool. I don't know. Keep up with the kids in LA, what they're doing. You know what I mean? So I need all the help I can get. Staying on the wide receiver conversation, because a guy that was drafted in the later rounds, I want to say he was a 6th rounder, Jordan Whittington. Well, guess what? the Rams have a new 6th-round draft pick to play with, thanks to Jonah Jackson. Let's talk about that. Were you surprised, the Rams trading him to the Bears? And now Snead has 4 6th-rounders in next month's draft. How did you feel about it? Talk about the Jonah Jackson experiment. Do you like this move? Do you think the Rams won this particular move?
So Jonah's obviously had an up and down tenure with the Rams. There were some good moments. There were some bad moments. I did hear that the Rams were going to tinker with their offensive line this offseason, so it did not surprise me. From the Bears' perspective, I totally get it. When you look at what the Bears have done along their offensive line in the last few days, you can tell that they have made it a effort to fortify that offensive line in front of Caleb Williams. So shout out to them to doing what needs to be done after he was sacked like the 3rd most in NFL history. As far as the Rams, though, it would not surprise me if Les Snead packages some of those 6th-round picks to try to move up in the draft, maybe to the 4th round, 3rd round, maybe even 2nd if they get lucky, or have a trade with the team to get another player. So it did not surprise me. The Rams offensive line started playing better towards the latter portion of the season. We addressed this multiple times throughout the show, especially later in the season. That's why they won the NFC West and won the playoff game. Their offensive line needs to continue to play like they did towards the end of the season to get to a much faster start. But yeah, it didn't surprise me, and on both sides. And who won the trade? I would probably have to give it to the Bears. And I only say this because when you look at the situation the Bears were in, you drafted Caleb Williams number 1 overall. He got outplayed at that position by Jaden Daniels. And one of the primary reasons he got outplayed because he did not have an offensive line to help protect him. And he got sacked the 3rd most in a single season NFL history. So when you're in that situation, you have to address the offensive line. And they did so. And so you have to give them credit for doing that with the additions that they made.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair point to say that the need was higher in Chicago, and what the Rams do is they don't waste time. They move on. And the thing that's great about what Les Snead and Sean McVay do is let's just take a look at the 6th round last year, right? They had Whittington, Carty, Bo Limmer, Tyler Davis. So those 4 options were, discovered in the 6th round and all well implemented in the offense throughout the season. So I think it was a draw. I'm not going to say, but I think you're absolutely right. I think the Bears get a fine pickup with a good guard in Jonah Jackson, and the Rams move on and pick up a draft pick that, like you said, which is interesting. I see that potentially playing out. Maybe he stacks his 6th-rounders and tries to move up and get a 4th or a 3rd. Staying in the LA area, Chargers releasing Joey Bosa after 9 years. A lot of people saying potentially he could play with his brother in San Francisco. A little bit about Bosa. He's missed 12 games in 22, 8 games in 23. He was a Pro Bowler in 24. But they didn't want to pay him. Do you see Bosa potentially being a guy that the Rams could look at and bring on here in LA?
No, because it goes against their philosophy and what they're trying to do. You can make a case that Joey Bosa is like the Cooper Kupp of defensive ends.
Good point.
A little bit older, getting extensive injury history. And at this point in his career, I actually even did a story about this. I think Bosa's best suited for maybe playing with his brother with the 49ers. They've expressed their desire to be teammates in the past, or maybe a team like the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons finished last in the NFC in total sacks. They needed more edge rushing help. I believe Matthew Judon's a free agent. Or Joey Bosa went to Ohio State, the Cleveland Browns. Myles Garrett wants to be traded. The Rams should go after him. So maybe a team like the Cleveland Browns can go after Bosa, but I don't see him as a fit with the Rams just because I don't know how much he would help. And when you look at the Rams' young defensive linemen, their young edge rushing group, why add a veteran who's had an extensive injury history, hasn't played more than 14 games, more than like 3 times throughout his career, and is still battling injuries? So, yeah, I just don't see it as a fit. It's a big name, though.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you on the philosophy. The Rams are looking to go younger. And it wouldn't necessarily make sense unless they got him at a pretty good discount.
Yeah.
And if he was really interested in staying in LA and moving on from the AFC West into the NFC West. But like you said, there are probably more attractive partners out there for Joey Bosa. So I'm assuming the Rams are going to swipe left.
Swipe left. I don't know about this swipe thing. What's
it's still funny. I don't either.
Are you sure?
But I'm trying to learn what the cool kids are doing, like I said. But yeah, no, I think it's a pass. I think it's a hard pass. I don't think that's going to work out here in LA, but it's always fun to kind of speculate. Before I let you go, since we like to speculate here, and as you already mentioned, let's talk Stafford here, because what Les Snead said to the media when they were asking about how the sense of urgency of finding, now that Stafford's locked up, now that Stafford's confirmed he is in fact going to stay in LA. And you don't happen to know any of the contract details yet, do you? It hasn't been
released. Not know. I just know it's a contract restructure. There's probably going to be more money up front, but they haven't released that, which I think is interesting. But then on the other hand, maybe they kind of agreed not to release it because, both sides are kind of tight-lipped about it and just want to keep it up.
Wait, you don't think we'll ever find? We have to find out.
Oh yeah, we're gonna find out. We're gonna find out.
They're like, why do we need to?
And they might not be done yet. Honestly, they might want to wait until free agency is done and till the draft plays out to kind of sort out the particulars. But it's kind of a handshake agreement, like we're going to take care of you. We want you in LA for the long and retire a Ram. Yeah,
and I think it does bode well for morale. Again, like you had said on our previous episode, the longer these sort of contract talks take, potentially, the more both sides could feel sensitivities moving forward. So I think last time it took 7 months. This time it took a few weeks or so. So hopefully they can make the handshake official, and us media members can pine over the amount of money that Stafford will be getting paid this season. So, but anyways, with that being said, the Rams have, if they stay at the 26th pick in the first round, you have alluded, you think they're going to go offense and pick a wideout as per your mock draft, which we need to post and promote because that's amazing. I love it. This is your first time doing it. Was it fun, by the way? Was it fun to do?
It was fun. I didn't make any trades. I was, asked not to do trades this time. Maybe if I do another one, I'm going to get a little bit crazy and trade some picks. But it was fun.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to post it. And in fact, actually, maybe we'll do an episode just dedicated to Tyler's mock draft, because I think that's interesting. We should definitely do that. Anyway, so if they stay 26 overall in the first round, speculation being that what Les Snead said, when it comes to looking for who could back up Matthew Stafford, he said that there is a sense of urgency. He said ASAP. Do they, and how soon, like in terms of the draft, how early do they try to find a backup? Do you think they're going to target it in the draft? Is it likely?
So part of me says yes, but part of me says no. And here's why. This year's quarterback draft class is not considered that strong. So on one hand, you could say maybe we can draft a quarterback mid to late rounds and kind of be like a project that Sean McVay can develop and he can learn under Stafford. And 2-3 years, he'll be ready. We'll draft the quarterback like potential. And in my estimation, I think a quarterback like Jalen Milroe would be perfect for the Rams. And I say that because he's raw. Don't get me wrong. Literally, the only thing good he did at Alabama was throw deep. He couldn't throw short. He couldn't throw intermediate, but he can throw a pretty deep ball. And so maybe if he gets with Stafford, works on his mechanics, Sean McVay has some tutelage with them in a few years, he can start at an NFL level. Or you can say, we don't like the quarterbacks in this year's draft. Jimmy Garoppolo, hey, come back, be here for a year or two, and then we'll dive into next year's draft to get a quarterback in the early to mid rounds. And I think that would be my projection, just because the Rams showed last year that they can be a Super Bowl type contender, and they are bona fide, probably the best team in the NFC West going into this next season. So don't use that draft pick on a quarterback that you're going to need 2-3 years from now. Use that draft pick on a player that can contribute right away and maybe could possibly start on offense or defense. So I would say draft the quarterback next year.
Well, it's really interesting. And we'll wrap up shortly, but when you are a GM and you are in the position of, the stopgap of having Stafford, who's 37, and he's a certain type of quarterback. He doesn't move around. He stays in the pocket. And when you're trying to fill the gaps of your playmakers around you, does that mean you need to look for a quarterback with the hopes of, obviously, in the next year or 2 years of Stafford, when and if he decides to leave, do you then find a quarterback that is like Stafford? Because how challenging is it if you build this offense and you get these wide receivers and they sort of become very familiar with the cadence and the way Stafford is as a quarterback? Is it a challenge then to find the heir apparent who may have different skill sets? Like, can the Rams even conceive of getting a mobile quarterback after being with Stafford for so long and building these pieces around him for the last 2-3 years?
I think Sean McVay's a good enough coach where no matter who the quarterback is, he can cater an offense that complements that quarterback and caters to his skill set. And Sean McVay is going to run a lot of offense out of the 11 personnel. That's 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, 1 running back. And with a mobile quarterback, I still believe you can run that personnel and you can be an offense that runs a lot of zone reads, runs a lot of read options. And I've never seen McVay with a mobile quarterback, but I think his offense will just open up endless possibilities. Could you imagine Sean McVay with Jaden Daniels? And are we saying he would have worked in LA? Not saying that's going to happen, but a quarterback that can not only throw, but can run. And so I think it would just open up McVay's offense so much more if you had a mobile quarterback. Now, yes, a quarterback that's going to pick you apart with his arm, that's the prototypical model for McVay's offense. But if you have somebody that can run around a little bit and use his legs, I just think his offense can go to an even higher level.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. You're right. We've never really seen it. And could it elevate it that much more when looking at the quarterback draft class and building the future? And again, it even is. We don't even know how long Sean McVay is going to be a coach here in LA, considering he's still going to have success. As there's been rumors before that McVay may get into broadcasting. Who knows?
He'll join us.
He'll join the show. We'll be our co-host. That's right. Yeah, I'm sure he'd take it. No problem. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think this is a time that I love speculating and breaking things down. And it's like almost like you said, the philosophy and the psychology of what goes behind building a franchise with these unique storylines that you're seeing in Los Angeles. You have a 37-year-old quarterback who can still play, but you have to think about the future. So many different things are at play,
Yeah.
And how the defense is very young, and how that defense is shored up some issues since Aaron Donald retired. So it'll be interesting. The draft is, what isn't it? April 25th. So it's, blink and it'll be here. We just finished the combine, and LA making some interesting moves. So
free agency's next week.
Free agent, I mean, it's a frenzy. It is a frenzy, and I am here for all of it. Tyler, where can we find your latest article and your latest mock draft?
You can find it at usatoday.com, or you can just look up my author page, usatoday.com/Tyler Dragon, and it'll be right there.
I say next episode, we're doing the Tyler Dragon mock draft extraordinaire. I'll bring the mimosas.
Okay.
And we'll do that, because I think all of these things that we've touched on, fans find interesting, even if you're not a Rams fan. It's what's happening.
Sound good.
And
once you heard that, I'll sold.
Bottomless mimosas. Let's do it. The Tyler Dragon mock draft show. I'll find us a good sponsor, and we'll be popping bottles soon. Tyler, I appreciate it. It's always so good to sort of get the latest on what's happening with the Rams as they look to repeat division titles, and some interesting guys in the mix. Could Joey Bosa come? Would we see Davante? I love it here. I'm here for all of it. Well, that'll do for us here at Believe in Rams. I'm Erin Coscarelli and Tyler Dragon. We'll be back with more on the draft and free agency. So much is happening in the NFL, so stay with us. Thanks for listening, guys. Talk to you later. Bye.